Hello students, I am Seuty. I'll be teaching you Introduction to Anthropology. Welcome to the first lecture of ANT 102 Summer 2020. One may ask the question, what is anthropology? I'm sure many of you are wondering what is anthropology. To put it simply, anthropology is the study of human beings and their products and experiences. Anthropology explores human diversity across the time and space, seeking to understand about the human condition. It also explores how our culture are connected, lives are interdependent. Anthropology explores how do we make sense of the world that we live in, organize life in groups, transmit knowledge, respond to various forces. The word anthropology came from two different Greek words. One is anthropos, which means man or human being, and second is logos, the study. So if you put together, it becomes the study of human being. Now, who were these early anthropologists? You must remember that anthropology is something that we do all the time, and people used to do it, but not formally or in organized manner, but people have been narrating culture throughout the history. So it's the merchants, travelers, as administrators, diplomat, missionaries, they were the first generation of anthropologists narrating culture. People like Ibn Khaldun, Ma Huan, during the 14th and 15th century, wrote about the world culture. They have divided the world in different categories, tried to create narratives of different geographical locations, the rituals and everyday practices. Now, if we look at the discipline of anthropology, anthropology started to getting formalized with the rise of colonies. So the history of anthropology is deeply embedded in colonial history as well. So if we look into the early anthropologists, who were these people? Most of them were white middle class men who were trying to understand the native cultures. Suppose Louis Henry Morgan between 1851 and 1877 wrote extensively on kinship of Iroquois Indians and other Indians, and actually he argues that these are the residual of ancient societies, and modern world has evolved from this kind of cultures. And similarly, but their take was very different. But Borislaw Malinowski, he goes and study people in Trobriand Islanders, and he actually says the final goal is to grasp the native point of view, his relation to the life, to realities, his vision of this world. But why do we need to study native? Why these people were so interested to study native? The simple, because most of these anthropologists were trying to grapple the societies that they were introduced to or exposed to, and with the colonial expansion, these anthropologists who actually were only reading the narratives of merchants and traders and diplomats actually thought it would be a good idea to have a discipline which explains these native people. And anthropologists are exactly the people who were fit to explain this world and new realities. So who are these natives and why were they studied? These natives were colonial subjects from the non-industrial societies. They needed to be understood for administrative purpose to govern them. So it was the colonial masters who actually needed to know the natives' way of life so that they can govern the natives better. Anthropologists were often self-appointed but served the purpose for the colonial masters. Early anthropologists were also the self proclaimed vanguard or savior of the cultures as well. Early anthropologists presented a simple, seamless, ahistoric, apolitical narrative of the natives, pitting them against the complex Western culture and always comparing how this world has came about from the ancient world. But what the crucial fact that they forgot is that they were talking about different people in different geographical area, and their lives were conditioned by the particular way of histories and the environment they were living in, and there were many forces that was shaping their lives. So suppose if you're talking about the Tropian Islanders as an ancient society and Indian as an ancient society, Tropian ancient societies and Indian ancient societies are absolutely different. And there is no reason to box them into the one category, which is native or people from ancient world. But obviously, anthropology has come a long way, and we have moved away from this early colonial historicization, early colonial understanding of anthropology. So contemporary anthropology looks very different from what anthropology used to be in 18th century, 19th century. Anthropology is ever evolving. It is a comparative field that examines all societies, ancient and modern, simple and complex, local and global. This is the study of a whole of human condition, past, present, and future. We not only look into the cultural life, but also biology, society, language. For example, we all eat, every human being eats to survive, and but the survival mechanism or the strategies are very different. Our food habits, meal time, what we consider as nutritious food is very different. So anthropology actually tries to understand these nuances of lived reality, and contemporary anthropology explores everydayness of life, questioning things that we take for granted. Suppose uh, food habit. We think that it's only natural that we eat the way we eat, but it has a long history, how it shaped the way we are today and what we consume as human beings. Finally, anthropology, contemporary anthropology, tries to decolonize the discipline, amending the work of predecessors, questioning the power relationship of anthropologists and their interlocutors. That means people that we study. Now we'll be talking about adaptation, variation, and change, the core thrust of anthropology for the longest period of time. What do we understand or what do we adaptation? Adaptation refers to the processes by which organisms cope with environmental forces and stresses. It took human beings only 10,000 years of cultural adaptation to transition from foraging to cultivating, and about 5,000 years for a civilization to rise. So one need to understand that it was not only biological adaptation. What is unique about human being, and that is also a unique way of understanding human being in anthropology, is that you need to understand that this adaptation is not only responding to the environment, but we inherit certain cultural trait and we pass this trait on to next generation. So many of these adaptive capabilities are transmitted uh, through cultural learning, which is very different from biological learning. So of course we do talk about biology, but we also talk about a lot about the cultural transitions. Our way lives are way more independent, we think, but it is actually not. Our lives are interdependent than ever before. The global economy and communication link people directly or indirectly in the modern world system. So our lives are continuously shaped by things that we see, experiences, learn, and things that is happening around us. So I can be a Bangladeshi sitting here and hearing about the pandemic that is happening in Wuhan, China, but within a month or two, it becomes my reality too. So there's a constant transaction that is happening between the worlds that we live in. So we are not isolated. We have never been isolated. And that is a core thing that you have to remember is that in anthropology, the culture that we study it may look like not so modern, um, quote unquote. It may not look like developed, quote unquote, but all these lives matters and every life is uniquely positioned in the world. I think I would end this section with a quote from Talal Asad to understand the relationship of anthropology and the colonial encounter. Assad says that we have been reminded time and again by anthropologists of the ideas and ideals of the enlightenment in which the intellectual inspiration of anthropology is supposed to lie. But anthropology is also rooted in an unequal power encounter between the West and the Third World, which goes back to the emergence of bourgeois Europe, an encounter in which colonialism is merely one historical moment. It is this encounter that gives the West access to culture and historical information about the societies it has progressively dominated, and thus not only generate a certain kind of universal understanding, but also reinforces the inequalities in capacity between European and non-European worlds. And derivatively between the Europeanized elite and traditional masses in the third world. I mean, if you what we've been talking about so far is basically is boils down to this is that anthropology uh, was was born out of the colonial encounter, and the way we look into the world is essentially um, and the way we experience the world is essentially is some way mediated by these encounters, and what we see as modern, what we see as developed is mediated by that. And we have been schooled to think in a certain ways where that makes the native people or people like us, brown people, not so developed, not feeling proud of ourselves, but also looking it through the Western gaze or Western eyes. We'll be talking about this more in the next sections and sections to follow. I'll end it here for the first part, and there is another section and second part where we'll be talking about the different disciplines and four fields of anthropology. Thank you.